Hi grades 3. Today we're going to learn about how we can convert time. So we are going to learn how to convert hours and minutes to minutes, and we're going to learn how to convert minutes to hours and minutes. So converting between hours and minutes to minutes, or sometimes you may have to convert minutes to hours and minutes. Okay? So the first thing I'm going to ask you is, in 1 hour, how many minutes are there in 1 hour? That was our lesson. The first time we talked about time. So my first lesson was there are 60 minutes in an hour. How many minutes are there in 2 hours? Well, there are 120 minutes in 2 hours, and I'll get to it in a minute. Like, how did I get from 60 to 120? If you want a quick answer, you can either multiply our hours or you can just add. So I added 60 times 2. That gave me 120. If I have 3 hours, I would either add 60 3 times to get 180, or I can just multiply 3 times 60. It would give me 180. Okay, so 4 hours, it is 240 minutes. 5 hours, it is 300. Again, I either added all these up 5 times or I multiplied. Okay, so you can choose to do whichever way is easier for you. But for now, I have added this chart in your math work this week. So please go grab this chart that you have in your math work, and let's have a look at it. Okay, so I have given you this chart already, so you can be looking at it. Okay, so if you look at 6 hours, that is 360 minutes, which I got by 6 times 60. So I multiplied 6 to 60, okay, to get 360 minutes. Now you can ask me, Miss David, but how do we find the number of minutes? How do we find that? How do we get to these minutes? Let's say I'm only given, I only have these hours. So I have like 3 hours or maybe 4 hours, and they're asking me, you need to convert it. I have 6 hours and 45 minutes, and they're asking me, how do you convert? Or how do you find the number of minutes altogether? How many minutes are in 6 hours and 45 minutes altogether? How many minutes do you have? So how do we convert our time, our hours and minutes to minutes? How do we do that, right? So if you follow your chart along, this one would go all the way to 10 hours, and 10 hours equal 600 minutes, which is 10 times 60 gives us 600. So that's how, and I want you to, as I'm saying this, grades 3, I do want you to follow along, because it's important that we know. Either you can know, or you can memorize, or you can, but what you need to know is that we are basically, to find the number of minutes, we can first multiply our hours by 6 and then by 10. Now that sounds very confusing, but when we do an example, you will see that it actually makes sense. So to find the number of minutes, we can multiply the number of hours by 6 tens. So that is, first we multiply by 6 and then by 10. Does that make sense? So let's do it. Let's do our one example so that we actually can see it and see how this whole converting from minutes, from hours, minutes to minutes actually works. Okay, so let's say we have 6 hours and 45 minutes. Now we need to find out how many minutes is that altogether. Now, since you have a chart right here, right in your hands, since you have a chart that is telling you that 6 minutes is actually, 6 hours is actually how many minutes? It is 360 minutes. So we have 360 for 6 hours. It's 360 minutes. And how many minutes do we need to add to 360? 45. So 360 plus 40. So 360 minutes plus 45 minutes, because 6 hours, if I look at my chart, it's telling me that 6 hours equal 360 minutes. And if I'm given this question that you have 6 hours and you have 45 minutes, altogether, how many minutes do you have? I went to my chart and I said, oh, 6 hours equal 360 minutes, but I have this 45 minutes left to add as well. So when we add 360 and 45, what do we get? I would have 5 here, 6 and 4 gives me 10. So I write my 0 here, I carry my 1 over here. 3 plus 1 gives me 4. How many minutes do I have altogether? I have 405 minutes. Okay, does that make sense? Now, let's say I want you to flip your chart and don't look at it. Okay, you're not going to look at it. Now we need to learn, if we didn't have this chart to help us, how would we know what to do? So, what do we do first? So we just learned that first we need to multiply our hours by 6 and then by 10. So I have 6 hours, right? So I'm going to do it right on the side so you can actually see. So first task is we are going to multiply our hours by 6 and then by 10. Okay, so let's do it. Multiply our hours. So I have 6 hours and I need to first multiply it by 6. 6 times 6 gives me 36, right? 6 times 6 gives me 36. And then I need to multiply my 36 to 10. So 36 times 10. Okay, so let's go and do it. So 0 times 6, anything times 0 is 0. 0 times 3 gives me 0. And then I'm going to put a 0 because that's telling me that I'm going to move to my second number. 1 times 6 gives me 6. 1 times 3 gives me 3. 0, I add my numbers, 6 and 3. Look, 360. Or grades 3, you can, instead of doing these 2 steps, you can multiply your hours directly to 60. So if you multiply your hours directly by 60, so we had how many hours? 6 hours. So let's multiply 60, because in 1 hour we have 60 minutes. So let's multiply our hours to 6. 6 times 0 gives me 0. 6 times 6 gives me 36. 360. So we can do it in many different ways. You can either do it, if it's simpler for you, the first one I told you, it's much simple. Okay, it's simpler. So what we did was I took my hours and first I multiplied it to 6. That's what I did. Whatever hour you have, it can be 10, it can be 4, it can be 3. So let's say if it was 3 hours, I would first multiply 3 to 6. The reason being, it's much easy to do our multiplication when it's just a single digit, right? If I just need to multiply 6 to 3, I can simply do that, right? Instead of doing it all the way to 60. So that's why I would suggest that you stick to the first method, which is you can first multiply your hours to 6, then you multiply the answer to 10. Does that make sense? So I multiplied my 6 to 6, which gave me 36, and then 10. So I got 36 and I multiplied 36 by 10, which gave me 360. So I got my answer. The second way I did was basically you have 6 tens. Basically, you're multiplying your hours to 6 tens. If I have 6 tens, so 1 10, 2 10, 3 tens, 4 tens, 5 tens, 6 tens. If I have 6 tens, that means I have what? I have how many? I have 60. So 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, right? So I have 60. So instead of doing it 2 steps, I would do it in 1 step. Does that make sense? But for now, please remember, whatever hour you are given, first step is to multiply that hour to 6. Then you multiply the answer to 10. So 6 and 10. Multiply. Okay, so you're multiplying your hour to 6 and 10, and then you add the remaining minutes to find the total minutes. So that's how we did it. So 6 hours, 45 minutes. How many minutes is that altogether? It is 405 minutes. That is how we convert our hours and minutes to minutes altogether. Now let's find out how do we convert minutes to hours and minutes. So first we only converted to minutes. Our hours and minutes were converted to minutes. Now let's find out how do we convert our minutes to hours. So I have 180 minutes. I hope you can see clearly. I'll just scratch it so you can, and I'll move down here. You have 180 minutes, and we need to find out how many hours that is, okay? How many hours is that? Now, to find out, to convert from minutes to hours and minutes, again, we're not going to look at our table, okay? It's much easier. Okay, so let's say we have our table. I have 180 minutes. 180 minutes. That should give me 3 hours, right? Because that table is telling me. It's much easy when you have the table. But let's say we lost our table. Let's say we don't know where our table is. So how are we going to convert our minutes to hours? And you need to listen carefully. So for us to convert 180 minutes, we are going to divide 180. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to divide 180 by 10 and then by 6. So dividing 180 first by 10 and then by 6. So here, when we had to convert from minutes, from hours and minutes to minutes, we were multiplying. Because look, we were going from small to big. So 405 is bigger instead of 6 hours and 45 minutes. Now we found out, oh, it's actually 405 minutes. That's a lot of minutes. So we were multiplying first to 6 and then to 10. Our hours, first by 6, then by 10. Now, when we are given our minutes and they're asking us, well, now you need to convert to hours, we use the opposite of multiplying. The opposite of multiplying, if you remember, is dividing. Okay, so first we are going to divide by 10 and then by 6. Whatever minute we have, first in multiplication, we were using 6 first and then 10. In dividing, we are using our 10 first and 6 later. Does that make sense? So please remember that. So 10 first. So I have 180 and I need to divide it by 10 first. Now we do know how to divide. So let's quickly divide up. I have 180 and I need to divide it by 10. And I need to sit in 10 times table since it's so easy. 10 times 10 is, 10 times 1 is 10. Then 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 10 times 10 gives us 100. So if you remember your division, we are going to divide 180 to 10. And so in 10 times table, we need to find a number that is either 18 or close to 18. Now I just said 10 times table, and we know that we would never ever find 18 in 10 times table, right? But we can find, the closest we can get to is 10 times 1, right? That would give us 10, because 10 times 2 would be 20. We are not looking for 20, and 20 would be way too big. We are looking for something 18 or something close to or less than 18, okay? So 10 times 1 gives us 10. Okay, grades 3, just a quick, very quick review. Remember the reason we cannot divide it, even though when we divide, we look at the first number. Oh, look, we cannot do anything to it because it's 1. We cannot, 10 cannot fit into 1, right? So therefore, we combined both these numbers, so it became 18. So 10 times 1 gives me 10. 18, then we subtract, remember our division, then we subtract, and 18, and so you have 18 pencils, I take away 10, you should be left with 8, right? And then I bring my 0 down, and since 10 times table is so easy, and we know we've definitely seen 80 in 10 times table, so 10 times 8 gives me 80, that's right. And I am left with nothing. Now, am I done? Absolutely not. I am not done, because if I say I'm done, that is telling me that 180 minutes equals 18 hours. That is insane. That's not correct, right? So because 180 minutes, oh, look, we found our chart again. 180 minutes should equal 3 hours. And how do we get to 3 hours? I said we would multiply first our minutes first by 10. Divide our minutes first by 10. And our next step is dividing our answer, which is 18, our quotient, which is 18, by 6. So let's go ahead. And I got my 18, right? And now I need to divide it by 6. So let's say our 6 times table. 6 times 1 gives me 6. 6 times 2 gives me 12. 6 times 3 gives me 18. That's right. So I am going to, 6 times 3 gives me 18. Here is my answer. 180 minutes equal how many hours? 3 hours. So I got 3 hours. So 180 minutes, if you watched a movie for 180, if it's 180 minutes long, you spent 3 hours watching the movie. So, and now, since we found our chart again, we see, oh, actually, our answer is correct. 3 hours equal 180 minutes. That's right. Okay. So for today, that is your lesson, grades 3. And I would like you to move to exercise 38 in your workbooks. So you're going to move to exercise 38 in your workbooks. And you should be looking at, so you should be looking at exercise 38. It's on page 82. And I was following page 82 in your textbook. And here we go. So page 82 in your textbook and page 81 and 82, okay? But make sure you finish these tasks on page 82 before you move to exercise 38, okay? On that note, I am going to wish you good luck, and I'll see you next time. Bye.